Hello and welcome to the 7th episode of Planetos Podcast, a podcast dedicated to fans of George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire and HBO's A Game of Thrones. Spoiler warning for our listeners, the show will cover all material, the main series, Dunk and Egg, the novellas, The World of Ice and Fire, quotes and interviews by George, and episodes of the show and its commentaries and bonus material. Anything and everything. I'm one of your hosts, Brett. You can find me on Twitter at HomelyPillow.
And I'm your other host, Travis. You can find me at Sir_Travis on Twitter. We hope you enjoy today's program. So today we're going to do something a little different. We're starting a series within our podcast focused on minor characters. Now, Brett and I have made the first choice, and I think that we have a very interesting character, a character who's probably going to have a large role in the Winds of Winter. But we're going to open this up in the future to let you, the fans, choose which minor characters we focus on. So look out for polls on our Twitter feed and Facebook page. So we can let you make the decision. But like we said, today we'll focus on a very intriguing character, and that person is Aurane Waters, the bastard of Driftmark. Now, we all know that Aurane is a bastard of House Velaryon of the island Driftmark. So Aurane appears in A Clash of Kings in the chapter Sansa 8, and that's the chapter where Sansa is viewing the aftermath of the Battle of the Blackwater, where all of the lords and ladies who have supported the Lannister regime are being honored, and all of the captured lords and knights that fought for Stannis Baratheon are forced to kneel to Joffrey or be executed. And there's just a famous little line that says, "The bastard of Driftmark, nothing else is given." Aurane Waters becomes a more prominent character when we get to A Feast for Crows, where he appears in several chapters, specifically Cersei 4, Cersei 7, Cersei 8, and then is mentioned in Cersei 10. He's also mentioned in A Dance with Dragons. Now, there's some speculation that we'll do at the end of this podcast of where and what the Bastard of Driftmark may be doing in the Winds of Winter, and that will come from the sample chapter Aurane 1. Our conversation will focus on who is Aurane Waters, what does he do in the story, where does he come from, how does his family history affect him, and how he may impact the story in the next installments of the book series. So like we said, Aurane is known as the Bastard of Driftmark, and Driftmark is the largest island in Blackwater Bay and the seat of House Velaryon, which is sworn to Dragonstone. He is half-brother to Lord Montford Velaryon, who is killed in service to Stannis Baratheon at the Battle of the Blackwater. Now, the Velaryons gave several huge ships to Stannis' fleet, including 4 named ships: the Pride of Driftmark, the Bold Laughter, the Harridan, and the Seahorse. Like we said in A Clash of Kings, Aurane fights at the Blackwater and is captured during the battle and ultimately bends the knee to Joffrey. Now, back on Driftmark, Montford's 6-year-old son, Monterys, is now the Master of Driftmark and Lord of the Tides, which is a title we'll explore a bit later as we speculate on Aurane's future. In A Feast for Crows, Aurane Waters has been fully pardoned by the Queen Regent, Cersei Lannister. She names him to Tommen's small council as Grand Admiral, and he sets about building a small fleet of Drommons, about 10 in total, and manning them with poachers and thieves from the Black Cells using Cersei's hatred of the newly elected Jon Snow, the Night's Watch Lord Commander, to get her to agree to giving those men that are destined for the Wall for his service on the new royal fleet. At some point during the Cersei chapters, Aurane sells for Dragonstone, and he is transporting Loras Tyrell's forces to the siege of Dragonstone in support of Paxter Redwine's blockade. He returns to tell Cersei that Loras was mortally wounded storming the walls against Stannis' garrison. As unrest grows in the capital and Marjorie Tyrell is imprisoned by the Faith, Aurane Waters convinces Cersei to let him launch the fleet as a show of strength and as a prevention to Mace Tyrell if he should come for his daughter. Unfortunately for Cersei, as with most things, it doesn't work out very well for her because she soon loses faith in her Grand Admiral when, after she is arrested, she finds out that Aurane has absconded with her fleet and fled King's Landing. Now, everything with Cersei is a fuck up. So
it's a major one.
Yeah. Literally, she's the Mad Queen. Let's talk about Aurane's appearance. So he's described as very handsome and thin, with silver gold hair and gray-green eyes. He has a cleft in his chin and dons a beard. Now, Cersei says that Aurane reminds her of Rhaegar Targaryen, but with a much narrower face. She believes, as Cersei usually does about men, that Aurane desires her. Although in her later Feast for Crows chapters, Cersei comes to dismiss Aurane's similarity to Rhaegar. And we think that that happens because she becomes more bold and impetuous with what she believes is a very stable rule as Queen Regent. So let's talk a little bit, Brett, about Aurane. When I first read A Clash of Kings and I heard the title, The Bastard of Driftmark, I thought this was, okay, well, this is Lord Montford's illegitimate son or whatever, like Jon Snow. And then, of course, as I began to read A Feast for Crows and Aurane Waters came into play and became a more prominent character, I really got hooked on him, like, especially the moment, I think it solidified for me that moment where he steals the fleet and leaves. Like, I just think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
But, Cersei's small council is just a trip. It's a really fun chapter, especially Cersei 4 in A Feast for Crows, just because she's so wicked and she thinks she's so smart and she's got all these terrible people in place on the small council. And she just gets played left and right by all of them.
Yeah. I think it's funny how Pycelle's trying to, he's counseling her to use the older, more loyal men for this fleet, and she's just going with Aurane's suggestion of the younger men. It's just kind of obvious that he's planning some sort of betrayal.
Yeah, especially when you go back and you read these chapters again and you start to look a little more at his background and House Valerion. You begin to research some of that. You really start to get an idea that he's got something planned. We're going to talk about that here in just a little bit, about exactly what he has planned, what we think he has planned, and all the different possibilities. It's very interesting to talk about Pycelle. Pycelle is someone in the books is really creepy. On the show is just inept. But there's a pretty famous deleted scene. I think it's from maybe season 3 or season 4. I don't remember which one specifically.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Right, where he goes, Tywin is fishing, which is also interesting because Tywin throughout the series, the first time we meet him in the first season of Game of Thrones, he's skinning a stag, which is kind of a parallel. Either Robert has died at that point or is soon to die, and he's skinning that stag. Yeah. And then this is a deleted scene in season 3, but he's fishing and he catches what might be a trout or some other type of fish. But a lot of fans start to speculate that again, that's the demise of Catelyn Stark, Catelyn Tully, and a lot of the Riverlands power in season 3 with the Red Wedding and everything. So it's kind of an interesting parallel that in that scene, Tywin's fishing.
I never caught that, but that's a good point.
Yeah. And in this scene, Pycelle, staggers and stumbles hunched over down to the banks where Tywin is fishing. And you get a sense that, you don't get a sense Tywin turns and basically says, stop acting. And so Pycelle straightens up. And we do see that in the show. I don't remember which season it is, but he's just had a prostitute or a whore leave him, and he puts on the chains and he slumps over and starts kind of shuffling like a 90-year-old man would. But it's interesting, like I said, it's interesting that he's creepy and bumbling, but in this scenario he's giving her sound advice. Like he's making sense. He's saying, don't man these ships with thieves and poachers. Man them with men who are experienced and loyal. And because Pycelle says it and then Aurane contradicts, Cersei immediately goes, because 1, she doesn't like Pycelle, and 2, she thinks Aurane desires her. He looks like a Valyrian. So she immediately says, okay. Pycelle does a number of other things. He's advocating, which, obviously pisses Cersei off, but he's advocating for some of the Tyrells, saying, no, they're really bought into this scheme. I mean, their daughter is going to marry Tommen. I mean, appoint some of them to the council. They're here to help. They're feeding the city. They've got thousands of men guarding the walls, and she just can't see past her own terrible ideas. And it's just funny that again, a bumbling old buffoon in this scenario is probably one of the most capable right there, telling her.
Yeah, I mean, and he's a total Lannister crony, so I mean,
absolutely.
It's just kind of funny how he's even doing something that Tywin would have wanted,
Right.
But
right.
But no, I didn't catch that the younger men that he was employing were from the Black Cells. I didn't know that, and she did it specifically to spite Jon,
right?
Which is gonna backfire yet again.
Exactly. As we move into some speculation here in a little bit, it's interesting that these people are in the Black Cells, and Aurane gets them to his service, and there's a potential ally or a potential employer of Aurane Waters that has always been associated with the Black Cells and the tunnels under the Red Keep and all of that. And so let's talk first a little bit about House Velaryon. And I always make sure I get that pronunciation right, because I always want to say Valeria. See, I just messed it up. Yeah, Valerian, but of course their name is Velaryon, which we can easily look and tell it's a Valyrian name. It's a really ancient house, and what I find interesting is that they left Valyria well before the Targaryens.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and it's speculated perhaps that they were the first Valyrians in Westeros. Now I know there's a lot of theories that dragons and dragon riders and other folks may have once been in Westeros or traveled to Westeros, but kind of in the documented history, I guess you could say, of Westeros and Essos, there I did it again. The Velaryons settled on Driftmark, which we again said is the largest island in Blackwater Bay. And they were eventually joined by the Celtigars of Claw Isle and then the Targaryens of Dragonstone. So I think that's just kind of interesting that these three houses of Valyrian ancestry kind of settle right there together. It makes sense, obviously. I think Dragonstone was obviously an outpost, I think, of the Valyrian freehold at one time. I think it's likely that all these Valyrian families knew that the other ones were there, and so they began to settle in that area.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, okay, so I've been listening to, I think it's the Rogue Prince and the Princess and the Queen together.
Yes.
I'm not sure, but the royal bastards, the Targaryen bastards, their last name is Valerian, or is it Valerian? Because that kind of confused me. So, do you know anything about that?
Yes. So let's talk here about the very famous, probably the most famous Valerian. So let's first say that not only do the Valerians share the old Valyrian ancestry, but they share a lot of similarities as well. You know, they've got the silver gold hair, the purple eyes, and pale skin that the Targaryens have. And they were dragon riders as well. So they at one point brought dragons to Westeros. Like you said, through the stories of the Rogue Prince and the Princess and the Queen, there's a lot of Valerians that ride dragons. And let's talk about the most famous Valerian, and that one of my personal favorite minor characters is Corlys Valerian, the sea snake, which I think is just an awesome awesome name. And of course, Corlys was an accomplished warrior, a world traveler, a very wealthy lord who ruled Driftmark. Now, Driftmark is both an island and the seat, the castle of the Valerians, but they also built a newer, bigger fortress called High Tide, which factors into the events of the Dance of the Dragons, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. Now, when you talked just a minute ago about the Valerians being integral to the story of the Rogue Prince and the Princess of the Queen, that is because the Corlys was a pivotal supporter of the Blacks during the Dance of the Dragons, because his son Laenor was married to Princess Rhaenyra. And his daughter Laena was married to Prince Daemon. Now, both of those characters eventually die, and Rhaenyra marries her uncle Daemon in true Targaryen fashion, and obviously are united in the Dance of the Dragons against the Greens. And Corlys is a pivotal supporter of the Blacks during that. He very wealthy, like we said. And if you look at the map, Driftmark is located at a key point in Blackwater Bay. You can't get to King's Landing and a lot of the castles along the coast and up Massey's Hook without encountering the Valerian fleet. And this is an interesting thing that I read too, and this goes back to the close ties between the Valerians and the Targaryens. It's said that the Targaryens ruled Westeros from the sky on their dragons, and then the Valerians and the Celtigars ruled the seas on their ships. I just think that's a neat. You can just imagine this fleet of ships on the tides with these dragons flying in the sky. That's a formidable sight.
And Was it? It's Daemon Targaryen, the uncle.
Right.
Man. He's a badass.
He is a badass.
And
It's really interesting. There are, especially in this one time period, that Dance of the Dragons, there are so many amazing characters
yeah,
in that time period. Rhaenyra is a great character. Daemon is a great character. Corlys Velaryon is a great character. Cregan Stark, who plays in a little later, is a great character. I mean, they're all just really really fascinating. I don't really care for the greens. I just do not like any of them.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so,
They were kind of, I don't know. It's kind of funny though. Like the greens start off like really shitty, and then the
yes,
blacks kind of become shitty
yes, you're
throughout.
right. Yep,
So at the end of it, they're just all shitty.
they're all shitty.
Except for maybe Damon and Nettles, I guess, unless he was sleeping with Nettles. I don't
Right,
know.
right. Yeah, Daemon, even as like terrible as some of the things he does, he still remains, like you said, a badass.
And Aemon, oh my God, is it Aemon? Is it Aemon?
I think
The
so. Yeah.
the man, yeah, that guy. He's just a prick. Like,
Yep.
yeah. Anyways, we're way off topic.
We are way off topic, but that's okay. That's what we're here for. We're here
Yeah.
to just talk. It's interesting that the when we talked about the position of Driftmark and the world traveling, the trips, the missions, the fleets that Corlys Velaryon sent around the world. At one time, I find this so fascinating. At one time, House Velaryon's wealth rivaled the Lannisters, and their
Oh,
fleets could stand against the Greyjoy's Iron Fleet. So that tells you just how powerful they were at one point. And obviously, when we meet them in A Song of Ice and Fire, they only give 4 named ships to Stannis. So they have fallen tremendously. And I actually saw there was a post, maybe on Facebook a few days ago, that someone was pointing out that, did George make a mistake? Did George make a mistake that he gave House Velaryon all this power, and now they have nothing? And everyone was respectful, but they were replying saying, that's what happens. Like sometimes
yeah.
rich people lose all they have, sometimes the powerful fall. So, but I think that's probably going to be part of the motivation here in just a few minutes when we talk about what Aurane Waters could be up to. That's probably part of the motivation that he is remembering some of the past glories of House Velaryon.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
And part of the reason they lose so bad is there's a very famous sea battle and air battle on dragons that happens in the Gullet, which the Gullet is that area between Driftmark and Dragonstone to the north, and the tip of Massey's Hook to the south, which is the entrance into Blackwater Bay on the way to King's Landing. And so this massive Velaryon fleet blockades the bay and King's Landing, and the Greens solicit support from the Triarchs in Essos, and they send a massive fleet and begin battling. Now the Blacks win. They win with dragons, they win with the Velaryon ships, but it's a very costly endeavor. And High Tide, that famous new castle of House Velaryon, is burned in the process, and a lot of Corlys Velaryon's treasure and servants and castles are destroyed in that siege. And that kind of starts the slow demise of House Velaryon with all its wealth and power.
Did you ever answer the so okay, you got House Velaryon, but then you've got Targaryen bastards, right? And their last name is Velaryon. It's spelled the same and everything. That kind of confused. That's what I was confused
Well,
about.
are those not Rhaenyra's children? Because
Oh, okay.
they're supposed to be the speculation is they're not Laenor Valerion's children because he was homosexual, and
Oh, but
so
okay, but it's okay. So they're calling them bastards, but they
right,
have, and she's
right, and
okay.
that right, and that was a to use a political term, that was a talking point that the Greens used against the blacks, that Rhaenyra had no legitimate children.
Man, I fell for their
Um,
propaganda. Oh.
yeah, it's clever propaganda, obviously, because like you said, the Greens start out as terrible shits, but they hold the capital and the seat of and King's Landing and a lot of Westeros for a while. I guess you could say in the end, the blacks win because Rhaenyra's son is eventually seated on the Iron Throne, which comes at a cost to Corlys Velaryon because he poisons. Is it Aegon? Isn't the kid's name Aegon, one of the Greens?
The king, right? I mean, the king is
Yeah,
Aegon. Yeah, the one. Yeah, the one that. Yeah, the one that's
yeah,
broken.
yep. But you made a good point that the Valerians and the Targaryens have a really intertwined history. There are, if you look back through the family tree of the Targaryens, which is just a clusterfuck in and of itself, there are so many Valerians that are married into the Targaryens, and they, dating far back before even Aegon's conquest, because Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys's mother was a Valerian, and then another Valerian was mother to the old King Jaehaerys and good Queen Alysanne. So Valerian's again very much tied to House Targaryen.
I like I like how there are a lot of parallels between in the book, like the later events in A Song of Ice and Fire
Yep.
and A Dance with Dragons. I've been actually catching on to those.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that I've. If you listen to History of Westeros or Nauticast or any of the other podcasts that are covering the books and covering some of the events, you'll find like you said, there's a lot of parallels to history now, to A Song of Ice and Fire. Excuse me, Westeros and Essos history that George uses. Now, I think some people speculate that you can look back and you can see a lot of things happening again, because George believes, in cycles. He believes that, the past is prologue, things happen again. But there's a lot of things that obviously are different and will be different. But it is, like you said, interesting to see a lot of those parallels, and especially in houses. Like, there seem to be a lot of very similar characters in houses. The Starks. There's a lot of Starks that share a lot of similarities with each other.
Yeah,
They think a certain way, they act a certain way. The Lannisters. I mean, all these people.
the Baratheons.
The
Yeah,
Baratheons. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially the Baratheons. I mean, I think like every Baratheon that you read about in history just seems like a carbon copy of Robert.
which I love Lionel Baratheon.
Oh yeah, yeah. What
He's
is it? The
so
Laughing
great.
Storm.
Yeah, like I hope he shows up more in the as the Duncan Egg novels come out or novellas come
Yeah.
out.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's definitely an interesting character. So let's talk just real quick. Finish up some background on House Valerion, specifically about the Dance of the Dragons, which is a pivotal moment in that house's history. Now, we talked previously about Corlys Valerion being a strong supporter of Princess Rhaenyra's claim. Well, at some point during the conflict, he switches sides. Rhaenyra loses the support of Corlys after she flees the city, King's Landing. Corlys becomes a supporter of Aegon II, who is obviously from the Greens. He's actually there's a large army of the North headed by Lord Cregan Stark, that is moving south. It's joined by a large army of Riverlanders. And so Corlys is advising Aegon II, join the Night's Watch, join the Night's Watch. You've got to give up your seat. They're coming for you. You can't hold the city. And he refuses. Aegon II refuses. So what happens? Aegon II is poisoned. We don't know who poisons him. There's a lot of speculation on who it is. But the city is taken over by Lord Stark, which becomes known as the Hour of the Wolf. I think he only serves 2 or 3 days as Hand of the King and as regent. And he just begins imprisoning everyone, executing a bunch of people. He eventually frees and pardons Corlys Velaryon. I think it's actually a Blackwood that convinces him to do that, and she marries, and that's where the Blackwoods then marry into the Stark line. So then Corlys goes on to serve as regent for Aegon III, Rhaenyra's son, when he is crowned. And the Dance of the Dragons is then come to an end. So, Velaryons, like we said, have been tied to the Targaryens for many, many years. They've served as masters of ship on small councils. They've been lord commanders of the Kingsguard. They've been grand admirals and regents, among other titles. They're dragon riders in their own rights. Their ships have often made a huge portion of the royal fleet numbers. And like we said, remember that image, Targaryens in the sky and Velaryons and Celtigar ships in the sea controlling Westeros. Now, House Velaryon's words are the old, the true, the brave. And their banners are a silver seahorse on a field of aquamarine. Now, this is something I found interesting, and I did not know, but they have a throne, a very, very ancient seat called the Driftwood Throne. And according to legend, it was given to the Velaryons after they signed a pact with the Merling King, who was an ancient god of the Narrow Sea. Yeah, so, and actually those banners, those silver seahorse on a field of aquamarine, they're seen throughout the series, A Song of Ice and Fire, and actually Jon sees those banners at the wall when Stannis attacks the wildlings. So there are still some forces of House Velaryon serving Stannis in the north. Yeah, so, and then finally, we talked about this just a little bit earlier, that not only are the rulers of House Velaryon the masters of Driftmark, but they are also known as the Lord of the Tides, which obviously is because they've been a powerful seafaring family. They've controlled fleets of ships. They've used their naval power against enemies. Their lands and their castles are right on the sea, which they've used to extract wealth from trade and trade routes in the area. And obviously, like we said, Corlys Velaryon has been a world traveler, going all over the world and bringing back riches. So now, with all of that foundational information, we get to talk about what we think Aurane Waters is going to do. So let me start with this quote. I love this quote. It's a conversation between Cersei and Jaime. And Jaime asks Cersei, "There is talk that you mean to make Aurane Waters the master of ships." Cersei responds, "Has someone been informing on me? Waters is well suited to the office. He has spent half his life on ships." "Half his life?" Jaime asks. "He cannot be more than 20. 22, Cersei responds, "And what of it? Father was not even 21 when Aerys Targaryen named him Han. It is past time Tommen had some young men about him in place of all these wrinkled graybeards. Aurane is strong and vigorous." Jaime responds, "Paxter Redwine would be a better choice. He commands the largest fleet in Westeros. Aurane Waters could command a skiff, but only if you bought him one." So that tells you again what a lot of the people think about Aurane Waters, and especially Cersei's elevation of him to the small council and to the position of Grand Admiral, which of course is Master of Ships, but she has taken a lot of the titles from the Free Cities and adapted them to Tommen's small council. There's a very interesting quote that comes from Ariane 1 in The Winds of Winter, and it really potentially foreshadows exactly what, and it's not even foreshadows, it's just right there. It could be what Aurane Waters is doing with that fleet that he stole. In The Winds of Winter, Ariane has left Sunspear, and she's traveling north to try and reach Aegon, who is in the Stormlands, getting ready to take Storm's End. I think it's House Tollard that she is visiting. She's staying at as she travels, and they tell her this quote: "A new pirate king has set up on Torturer's Deep. The Lord of the Waters, he styles himself. This one has real warships, 3 deckers, monstrous large. You are wise not to come by sea. Since the Red Wine fleet passed through the Stepstones, those waters are crawling with strange sails." Now that sounds like it's probably Aurane Waters, right?
Yes, yeah.
I hate to say it like this, but he's a bastard. And in Westeros, sometimes bastards are looked down upon. That they're quick to take the nefarious way in life. We know Jon Snow doesn't do that. We know a lot of bastards don't do that, Gendry and others. But Aurane, these ships, these 3 deckers, we know that the Dromans that were commissioned are like twice as many oars as the ones that Stannis' fleet battled and defeated when he sieged King's Landing. So when people are saying they're monstrous large, they're 3 deckers, it's most likely that that would be Aurane Waters.
Well,
but I think the real... Go ahead.
Well, and the Lord of the Waters, and then you got
exactly
Lord of the Tides. Yeah.
Yep. And that's a like you said, that's a clever play on Lord of the Tides, and obviously Waters is Aurane's last name, which is the noble bastard name of the Crown Lands. But like you said, it also implies Lord of the Seas, Lord of the Tides, Lord of the Waters. So I think it's probably pretty clear that this is the pirate king that we hear about. So there's a lot happening to begin with in the Stepstones. The Stepstones is that area between Dorne and Essos. It was famously at one time connected in history, which I think it would have been called the Arm of Dorne at one time. It stretches. Now it's a series of islands. So let's just real quick talk about what has been happening on the Stepstones. So first of all, we know that Victarion Greyjoy stops at the Stepstones to resupply as he's selling the Iron Fleet to Slaver's Bay. And actually at the Stepstones, he splits the Iron Fleet into three squadrons. And many are lost to storms and other mishaps before some of them ultimately reunite at the Isle of Cedars. The Red Wine fleet has sailed through there recently as it's racing for Old Town to take on the Greyjoy longships and whatever Euron has planned for Old Town. We know that the small council hears that the Golden Company has landed there. They're not sure why. We know through John Connington's chapters in A Dance with Dragons that they hit some storms and some of the ships were lost. They went in wrong directions, and so they're all waiting to reconnect at some point in the Stormlands. And then this is an interesting one. Davos, in his chapters in A Dance with Dragons, he's dropped off at the Three Sisters by Salador San. And Salador tells him that he is taking his pirate fleet back to the Stepstones. So with all of that information, this is a lot to unpack, we know, but and we're going to famously speculate a bit here. There's a lot going on at the Stepstones. We think Aurane Waters is the pirate king of the Stepstones. If he is, what's his next move? Is he happy, to use a ocean term? Is he happy as a clam just to be the pirate king of the Stepstones? Or is he working with someone? Or will he eventually support or work with someone? What do you think?
I think there's a couple ways it could. Well, I mean, there's obviously a lot of ways it could go. But what I like, the two things I like is he's either playing a bunch of sides and trying to see, gauge his opportunities and figure out who's coming up on or who's coming out on top, and then joining up with them. But I like the theory that he's going to join up, or he's going to join back up with Stannis. Because if you
Yeah,
think about it, a lot of those people in the Black Cells were probably captured Stannis supporters from the Blackwater.
that's
So,
possible. Yeah.
so, but then again, the Black Cells could be Varys, but I personally like the fact I like thinking that he's still loyal to Stannis because you
Yep.
get the patch face prophecy. Patch face says, "I will lead it, the bells rang merrily. We will march into the sea and out again. Under the waves we ride seahorses, and mermaids will blow seashells to announce our coming. Oh, oh, oh." Seahorses are the sigil of House Valerion, and then mermaids are Manderleys.
Right.
Or,
And then, well, yeah, no, you're right. The Manderley, mermen, but
yeah.
still the same thing. Um, which
So,
obviously we know that Lord Manderley's he has what, two daughters, so they're mermaids.
mhm.
The seashells represent the Westerlings, right? Which is kind of an odd. Um,
Yes.
you kind of think, how do the Westerlings get involved with the Manderleys and the Valerians? But eventually, we think all these characters, all these groups are gonna start coalescing and coming together. So it's quite possible that that somehow they do.
Yeah, so
Um,
I think he'll end up maybe somewhere at Eastwatch eventually.
okay, so let me just say it like this: if he's supporting Stannis, why is he going in the wrong direction? Like, why did he sell for the Stepstones?
That I mean, yeah, that is a good point.
Maybe he's not the Pirate King
He
of the Stepstones.
he may not be.
Maybe that's Salador Sand. We heard in Davos's chapters that he's selling for. Again, this is like you said. There's so many possibilities of how this could play out,
I
and George George has so many balls in the air and cards up his sleeves that he can play it any which way. I personally I
I
want him to go support Stannis.
yeah.
I just wonder. It makes so much sense, Lord of the Waters, Lord of the Tides, for him to be on the Stepstones. So I'm just trying to figure out, why would he be there if he's supporting Stannis?
Yeah.
Um,
I like
which,
I like the fact that this is like a great example how like a very minor character can play a
yep,
major role
yep.
in the outcome of the story.
No, you're absolutely right. He only has 10 ships, and I'm not even sure he has the full 10, because I think in one of the chapters there's only like 5 or 6 that are complete and ready to sail, and he actually and here's another interesting point in favor of what you just said, that he could be supporting Stannis. I think at some point in the Feast for Crows chapters of Cersei, he tells her, "Look, there's only 5 of these ships done. We gotta get some more coin. We gotta get that coin put in those ships and pay these men and get this ready and get them armed." And where does Cersei find the money? She finds the money by refusing to pay back the Iron Bank. So then what does the Iron Bank do? They go north and they support Stannis Baratheon.
Yep. Well,
So
guess
go ahead.
who else went to the Iron Bank, right? Didn't who went to Essos with uh
He hasn't yet.
or yeah, he's selling to what?
Justin Massey. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I guess that wouldn't line up then. Because I was going to say
Right.
maybe he went to chase
He,
him down.
but and he's using that money. And there's actually some speculation that if Aurane is selling north, he could stop at like Bravos and either transport the sellswords that Stannis hires, that Justin hires. But we do know that a lot of the sellsword companies in Essos are already engaged. The Golden Company is now in Westeros doing its own thing, and then a lot of the other sellsword companies are already hired fighting in Marine.
Yeah.
But obviously, I'm sure there's still some swords and some folks out there willing to sell them, his sellsword that could come to Stannis. So yeah, I think the fact that he served Stannis in the Battle of the Blackwater, Stannis still has Valyrian banners in his forces. Jon sees them, like you said, with Patchface's prophecy. There's probably a distinct possibility that Aurane is still working for Stannis, or would like to make his way to Stannis, and maybe he was just, playing a game in King's Landing to do what he could to then eventually get back to Stannis.
Well, yeah.
So I think
he had to survive.
He had to survive. That's exactly right. So let's talk about some of the other possibilities that this new Lord of the Waters could be engaged in. Maybe he remains the Pirate King of the Stepstones. Maybe Salador San's fleet comes south and they create one giant pirate fleet and they do their own thing. But I think there's a lot of other stuff happening in the area that they're going to eventually side with someone if they don't turn around and go north headed back to support Stannis. Could he be an agent of the Tyrells?
I think so. He definitely could be, because he is seen talking with one of Marjorie's handmaidens, right?
Right.
So
he is seen talking to them. If he's trying to circumvent or create chaos in Cersei's plans or her rule as Queen Regent, he's very effective at it. I think the key thing here is it depends on what really happened to Loras Tyrell at Dragonstone. If Aurane transported him and Loras is just literally hanging out at Dragonstone, like, we took the castle, I'm going to sit here and rest a little bit, everything's good, and Aurane came back and spread that false story that Loras was mortally wounded, and Cersei gleefully takes the information and runs to Marjorie to make her feel terrible, then it could have been a Tyrell ploy to see what Cersei would do with the information. Could have been someone else playing with that information to sow dissension between Tyrell and Lannister. I think, yes, it's possible he's a Tyrell agent, but I also think, what would they need? They have so many supporters already in King's Landing. Yeah. They don't need a fleet. They've got the Red Wine fleet with just 200 fucking ships.
Yeah.
I think really comes down to what really happened to Loras.
I feel like he kind of fits into that. He's just trying to play like different sides to see where he can get. But I think ultimately he's got some sort of plan, I think.
Right.
But
he could.
I think he's using different sides to help himself out.
Yeah.
Until he gets.
Like you said, he could be a Littlefinger type, that he's just there to sow chaos, and
which is something else I like. Not really a theory, but
it's interesting that one of the, now, like we said, Aurane is a bastard of House Valyrian, and they famously have the silver gold hair, purple violet eyes. He doesn't, however. It's described as gray-green, and the only other character that has gray-green eyes is Littlefinger. And so some people speculate, well, is this an illusion that he's in league with Littlefinger? That's possible, because, like we said, Aurane appears in that Sansa chapter in A Clash of Kings, and then he famously disappears for a whole book. So he, we think he's there at court in King's Landing, and George probably thought, oh, I can, reintroduce this character of Feast for Crows and have him do something pretty interesting. So, off the page, if you will, Littlefinger could have been cultivating him as a spy and as an asset. Other than that, there's really not a lot. There's really not a lot there, unless for some reason Aurane shows up at the Vale with his fleet.
Well, which could be a possibility because we shouldn't take the show as evidence for something that's going to happen in the books. But if the Vale army needs to be north for some reason, which I assume the Vale's going to do something at some point.
Yeah,
he'd be the perfect person to transport that army because I don't think they really have much of a fleet.
That's true. They probably have some ships at Gulltown, but it probably is not. It would take a while to get all those Vale troops because, like you said, they've not been engaged in the war, and so they probably have a good 20,000 or so in forces that they got to get north or wherever Sansa's going to take them. So that's a fair point. But other than gray green eyes, there's really no textual evidence that he's aligned with Littlefinger.
Yeah, that'd be kind of. I mean, you can always leave Littlefinger on the table as an option though, because you never know what he's got up his sleeve.
Right.
But yeah, there's not really much to.
I think another possibility is Varys.
Yeah.
He has the same ability as Littlefinger to kind of be off the page, off screen, cultivating Aurane after the Battle of Blackwater. And he definitely, I mean, there's absolute evidence, he says it himself, but he wants a breakdown in the Lannister-Tyrell alliance. So Aurane saying, the certain thing about Loras, stealing the fleet, which that means King's Landing has no naval power to protect them. And we know that Varys is behind Aegon. And here's something interesting that the Golden Company John Connington says regarding the Golden Company, and Aurane says it as well to Cersei. Aurane says that on the docks of King's Landing, he has heard that Stannis has hired the Golden Company. Now, the Golden Company has yet to land in Westeros when this conversation happens. But when John Connington lands and the Golden Company lands, he famously says, let King's Landing think this is Stannis Baratheon. Now, he says a lot of other things. He doesn't just say, my plan is to make them think this is Stannis Baratheon. He's just throwing that out there. Let them think it was Stannis Baratheon. Let them think the Golden Company has just come home. Let them think that me, the Griffin, has returned to take Griffin's roost. He just wants them to think something. He even famously says, don't fly any Targaryen banners. We do not want them to know what's happening. But that's interesting that Aurane says that, already starts laying the groundwork that Stannis is behind this. And then it's something that John Connington says as well. But that leads us into the fact that if he is at the Stepstones, he could potentially encounter some of the Golden Company fleet that has gone missing, that's landed at the Stepstones. What if he hears that Aegon Targaryen, Rhaegar's son, has returned? We just went through it, brother. There's so much history between House Targaryen and House Valyrian. I mean, it's got to be something he has to consider. And I kind of think, just from a proximity standpoint, you're at the Stepstones, you got this fleet, and right over here in the Stormlands is Rhaegar's son. Like, you got to consider that as a possibility.
I mean, it is. I mean, it is like a big possibility, and I think that's more likely than him going to Daenerys.
Yeah, I think it's a lot for him to be sailing for Slaver's Bay. One, just logistically, that's a lot of characters coming Daenerys's way. I could see the possibility that he joins Daenerys as her fleets arrive from Essos. That's a possibility. I just think that time is against that, though.
Yeah.
We have no idea when she's going to arrive in Westeros. I think most people think it's probably going to happen in the, towards the end of the Winds of Winter. That she may even just be sailing at the halfway mark or 3/4 of the way through Winds of Winter and won't make it to Westeros until maybe even the end of the book, or hell, even the first chapter of A Dream of Spring, maybe her landing in Westeros. So I think he's got to be engaged in something, whether it's going north to serve the one true king, or rounding up the Golden Company and taking them to Storm's Landing, geez, the Stormlands, or just being content with being the Pirate King. I mean, I want to be the Pirate King. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
To be the Pirate King. What about one other thing? And I'll preface this point by saying I really don't think this is going to happen, but I think it's something we should consider. Could he be in league with the Ironborn? Could he be going for Old Town? I mean, I just think that's just not going to happen.
No, not with Euron. I think.
Right. I mean, there's if there's nothing to link them, him and Euron, there's not even eye collar to link them, like there is with Littlefinger. So I think we're right about that. The Old Town is, I think every ship at Old Town sinks. Those Krakens are going to tear him down. If there's some kind of blood magic, I mean, Euron's goal, I think he starts potentially even marching over land. I mean, I think Highgarden is more of a threat for him. I mean, obviously he can go up the river, to Highgarden, which I think is how, because George has said that Willis and Garland Tyrell will come into the picture of the Winds of Winter. So I think like Sam and others flee to Highgarden. So I just can't see Euron either selling further east and engaging with Aurane Waters, or Aurane coming that way. I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, and one other thing, there's one other quote that he does say that leads people to believe that he is still supporting Stannis, or he's plotting to get to Stannis. They hear at the small council meeting that Wyman Manderley has executed Davos Seaworth.
Yeah.
And so Aurane says, Stannis will need a new hand. And he says something like, perhaps a turnip knight instead of the Onion Knight. So that could be that he goes north to help Stannis. But again, my gut tells me that he might not end up with Fagon in the end. But I think the proximity to the Stormlands and what's happening with the Golden Company in that area, and eventually the Martells are going to be fully engaged in this. So there's a possibility that those Dromans even transport the Martell forces to Storm's End or something like that, or he returns and blockades King's Landing and he surrounds Cersei or something. Who knows?
Yeah. I don't know. I was looking at this Reddit post and looking at these comments, and someone said, well, Cersei refused to pay the Iron Bank for and like you said, build the ships instead. So technically, the Iron Bank owns those ships. So, and who are they giving their money to? Stannis.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
I don't know. It seems likely, but yeah, I don't know why he would sell to the Stepstone. But it could be that thing. He's just trying to do anything he can to survive until he can link back up with Stannis.
Right.
Possibly.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he could that could just be a safe harbor to get to quickly, to hide from the Red Wine Fleet. I mean, knows the Red Wine Fleet has surrounded Dragonstone and is selling south, so maybe he zips down to hide there for a little bit. I just don't know. It just seems to me like that's a long way in the wrong direction.
But I mean, it could be. I mean, I feel like you would have just sold the Bravos or something though to get out of the way.
And maybe he is. I mean, like the Lord of the Waters is just the thing that we just keep coming back to. That has to be him. That has to be, unless it's a misdirection by George. But that has to be him on the Stepstones. I mean, that's just too much of a play on words.
What if he went to the Stepstones to find Salvador San?
Could be.
And kind of convince him to come back over again.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's possible. That's if he really is in Stannis's services, perhaps he knows that Salvador San has left and going south, and so he wants to go try to round him up. Although I don't remember exactly if Davos. I kind of think the quote goes like Davos basically says to Salvador San, like, at least drop me off at Three Sisters, like they know that Salvador San is leaving, like Stannis knows, all these other people know. He's just like, I'm done, see ya. But he says, okay, I'll drop you off, my friend. Which, by the way, Salvador San, like, I wish he'd been in the show more. The guy who played him was excellent.
I really liked him.
Especially when he when he says to Matthew Seaworth, I'm going to fuck the queen, and he's like, you can't rape her. And he's like, I didn't say I was going to rape her. I said I'm going to fuck her.
Yeah, I really did like him in the show. They should have utilized him a little more.
Yeah. Well, so I think we lean toward, it sounds to me like we lean toward two possibilities. He's either still in service to Stannis, supporting Stannis, or he really is that pirate king on the Stepstones, and he's going to get drawn into probably Aegon Targaryen's and the Golden Company's invasion of Westeros. Like we said, Aurane Waters is a very interesting character. He's, like you said, he's one of these minor characters that just kind of comes out of nowhere, but leaves a lasting impression on the readers. And we're really looking forward to. Well, first of all, we're looking forward to the Winds of Winter, but we're really looking forward to seeing what he does in the book, where he lands, and what role he plays in the future of the series. That about does it for our first mini episode focused on a minor character. And like we said, we hope you all engage with us on this endeavor. We want you to make the decisions of who the focus are. We'll have a poll out very soon, if it's not out already, with probably 4 or 5 choices for our second featurette on a minor character. So watch for that. We'll keep that going. We'll have these episodes every now and then to focus on a minor character. So hope you enjoyed it. We thank you for listening, and watch out for the Lord of Waters.
I like the longer stuff, but these, if you like this shorter format or this series, let us know, or if you don't, let us know.
Yeah, and we say it's minor characters. We can always expand this later to, we talk about a certain region, or we talk about a castle or a certain event or whatever. We just think a minor character right now, especially with Aurane Waters being our first, was just a great choice. Actually, we both came up with lists. I came up with a list. Brett came up with a list, and I think Aurane Waters was one of the only same names we had on our list of who we wanted to focus on. So we decided, well, we should do Aurane, since we both seem to like him and want to focus on him.
Yeah, I'm really bad with minor characters, so I like, this is why I want to do this, because I get to sit there and research a minor character and learn a lot about him. So I knew nothing of Aurane Waters except for he disappeared with the ships and he's a pirate king now, or possibly.
Right.
So,
right.
But yeah, that's it. I guess that's it, right?
Yep.
Thank you all for listening. We want you all involved, so find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Planetos Podcast. You can listen to us on Soundcloud, Googleplay, and YouTube, and other platforms that support the RSS feed. You can email us at planetospodcast@gmail.com if you have any questions or ideas. I am one of your hosts, Brett.
And I have been your other host, Travis. We hope to see you around Planetos again.